Welcome to E-Bible Fellowship's Evening Bible Studies with your host and Bible teacher, Chris McCann. Please visit our website at ebiblefellowship.org. And now with his study in the book of Luke, here's Chris McCann.
Good evening and welcome to E-Bible Fellowship's Bible study in the book of Luke. Tonight is study number 11 in Luke chapter 1, and we'll be reading from verse 9. According to the custom of the priest's office, his lot was to burn incense when he went into the temple of the Lord, and the whole multitude of the people were praying without at the time of incense. There appeared unto him an angel of the Lord standing on the right side of the altar of incense. And when Zacharias saw him, he was troubled, and fear fell upon him. But the angel said unto him, Fear not, Zacharias, for thy prayer is heard, and thy wife Elizabeth shall bear thee a son, and thou shalt call his name John. All right, well, in our last study, we were discussing the burning of incense, and we saw how the Bible ties it together with the prayers of the saints. And even here in Luke 1, it's said to be the time of incense. And by the way, the Greek word translated as time means hour. So it's the hour of incense. And we saw in the book of Acts in a couple of places, the 9th hour is the time of prayer. And the close identification between incense and prayer helps us to understand that the time of prayer is equivalent to the time of incense. Because the Lord says in Revelation 5:8, he makes reference to the golden censer filled with incense and the prayers of the saints. Likewise, in Revelation chapter 8, twice God ties together incense with the prayers of the saints. And the saints are, no, they're not super holy, special people that a church must recognize and canonize and build statues to. That is contrary to the Bible in every way. Saints are each and every one of God's elect people. Everyone who has been saved is a saint, because a saint means to be made holy. And in salvation, God has made each one he has saved holy through that purging process, the washing away of sin that takes place as God has paid for all their sins. Well, anyway, we were looking back in Numbers chapter 16. In Numbers 16, where an uprising took place during Israel's wilderness sojourn of 250 princes of the assembly who were famous men in the congregation, men of renown, and a contest was put forth. And in this contest, these 250 men who were princes of various tribes, yet, Zacharias was a priest. He was a descendant of Aaron and Levi, and fully qualified to offer incense. His lot was to burn incense, and only for the priest. And even the priest had to be especially careful in the manner in which they burn incense, as we saw two sons of Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, who were said to have offered strange fire when they burned incense, and the Lord slew them by fire. So it's a very serious matter that only those qualified by God, and they must be of a certain heritage or lineage and be descendants of Aaron, they only are qualified to burn incense. None of these princes are qualified. As a matter of fact, we'll come back here to Numbers 16. If we go over to 2 Chronicles chapter 26, we see another man who was king over Judah. He was a great king over Judah, and yet he was lifted up in pride. We read in 2 Chronicles 26, beginning in verse 16, and his pride got him in trouble. And I'll start reading from verse 16. But when he was strong, his heart was lifted up to his destruction, for he transgressed against Jehovah his God, and went into the temple of Jehovah to burn incense upon the altar of incense. So he's not going into the Holy of Holies. He's not, making that drastic of a mistake. He is going into the altar of incense like Zacharias went into the altar of incense. Well, and it goes on to say in verse 17, and Azariah the priest went in after him, and with him 80 priests of Jehovah that were valiant men, and they withstood Uzziah the king, and said unto him, It appertaineth not unto thee, Uzziah, to burn incense unto Jehovah, but to the priests, the sons of Aaron, that are consecrated to burn incense. Go out of the sanctuary, for thou hast trespassed, neither shall it be for thine honor from Jehovah God. Then Uzziah was wroth, and had a censer in his hand to burn incense. And while he was wroth with the priest, the leprosy even rose up in his forehead before the priest in the house of Jehovah, from beside the incense altar. And Azariah the chief priest and all the priests looked upon him, and behold, he was leprous in his forehead. And they thrust him out from thence, yea, himself hasted also to go out, because Jehovah had smitten him. And Uzziah the king was a leper unto the day of his death, and dwelt in a several house, being a leper. For he was cut off from the house of Jehovah, and Jotham his son was over the king's house, judging the people of the land. How awful for King Uzziah that he was struck with leprosy because he dared do that which did not appertain to him. It was not for him to burn incense on the altar of incense, but it was for the sons of Aaron. And the language that he was cut off from the house of Jehovah is grievous language that would at least point to being slain spiritually for those who are cut off from the house of Jehovah. That is an awful thing. Well, returning to number 16, Korah and those with him were told to take censers. And in verse 7, and put fire therein, and put incense in them before Jehovah tomorrow. And it shall be that the man whom Jehovah doth choose, he shall be holy. Ye take too much upon you, ye sons of Levi. You see, Korah had said to Moses and Aaron in verse 3, ye take too much upon you, seeing all the congregation are holy, every one of them, and Jehovah is among them. So, in other words, we're holy also. We are holy. Okay, so this is a test of true holiness. Let's see who is holy, and the one whom the man whom Jehovah does choose, he shall be holy. There we can see the connection to God's election program, because we are saved according to election. As Jesus said, you have not chosen me, but I have chosen you. And those who would think they can choose Christ, accept Christ, are in the same place as Korah and these princes of the congregation. Oh, we're holy. We can offer incense. All right. But no, not actually. Only those whom God has chosen. I will have mercy upon whom I will have mercy is the salvation program of God. And that's what is laid out in the Bible. Well, a little further along here in Numbers 16, if we go to verse 17 and read, it says, "And take every man his censer, and put incense in them, and bring ye before Jehovah every man his censer, 250 censers, thou also, and Aaron each of you his censer." Now, there's a few ways we could break down 250, but it can be broken down 5 times 5 times 5 times 2. The 5 has to do with the atonement, and remember the offering of incense on the Day of Atonement. So that certainly can be in view, and 2 with the caretakers of the Word of God. But anyway, in verse 18, "They took every man his censer and put fire in them and laid incense thereon and stood in the door of the tabernacle of the congregation with Moses and Aaron. And Korah gathered all the congregation against them unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and the glory of Jehovah appeared unto all the congregation." And verse 20, "And Jehovah spake unto Moses and unto Aaron, saying, Separate yourselves from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment." Now here we find a reference to "in a moment," and "in a moment" has become more familiar to us over the course of this prolonged Judgment Day after May 21, 2011. We've seen this reference to a moment appear in several places that identify with Judgment Day. So we can understand this to be a reference like the day of the Lord, the hour of judgment. "In a moment" also ties into Judgment Day. And God wanted to destroy the whole congregation, but they fell upon their faces and said, "O God, the God of the spirits of all flesh, shall one man sin, and wilt thou be wroth with all the congregation?" So intercession was made for the congregation, and God did not destroy all the nation of Israel. And then a little further on, we find out what happens in this contest, where we read in verse 27, "So they got up from the tabernacle of Korah, Dathan and Abiram on every side, and Dathan and Abiram came out and stood in the door of their tents, and their wives and their sons and their little children. And Moses said, Hereby ye shall know that Jehovah has sent me to do all these works, for I have not done them of mine own mind. If these men die the common death of all men, or if they be visited after the visitation of all men, then Jehovah hath not sent me. But if Jehovah make a new thing, and the earth open her mouth, and swallow them up with all that appertain unto them, and they go down quick into the pit, then ye shall understand that these men have provoked Jehovah." And it came to pass, as he had made an end of speaking all these words, that the ground clave asunder that was under them, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed them up, and their houses, and all the men that appertained unto Korah, and all their goods, they and all that appertained to them went down alive into the pit, and the earth closed upon them, and they perished from among the congregation, and all Israel that were round about them fled at the cry of them, for they said, Lest the earth swallow us up also. And there came out a fire from Jehovah, and consumed the 250 men that offered incense, just as Nadab and Abihu. They were consumed in this judgment of God. They were not chosen by lot to offer incense. They were not chosen in the sense they were not of Aaron, and they did not have the duty assigned to them to offer incense. In other words, they were not the saints. That they were not God's elect people. And so God destroyed them. Now, as a result, God did not destroy the whole congregation, but he did send a plague upon the congregation of Israel. And so we read in verse 45, "Get you up from among this congregation, that I may consume them as in a moment." There's that reference to moment again. "And they fell upon their faces. And Moses said unto Aaron, Take a censer, and put fire therein from off the altar, and put on incense, and go quickly unto the congregation, and make an atonement for them. For there is wrath gone out from Jehovah, the plague is begun. And Aaron took as Moses commanded, and ran into the midst of the congregation. And behold, the plague was begun among the people. And he put on incense, and made an atonement for the people. And he stood between the dead and the living, and the plague was stayed. Now they that died in the plague were 14,700, beside them that died about the matter of Korah. And Aaron returned unto Moses unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and the plague was stayed." Now in this case, Aaron is qualified and to offer incense. He takes the censer, puts fire from off the altar, and put on incense, and he quickly went unto the congregation to make atonement for them, because wrath had gone out from Jehovah and a plague had begun. So the judgment was on Israel. We can understand that this would tie in with judgment beginning at the house of God, that God is coming to judge those who have dared to take the gospel. They have dared to take his word into their mouths, and they are not qualified to do so. They are ungodly. They are unsaved. They have not been made saints. They are not holy because they have not had their sins washed away. And yet Aaron intercedes on behalf of the congregation of Israel, which would point to spiritual Israel, those that the Lord truly saved. And the offering of incense is tied to the atonement made for the people. So we can see all that. Now, it should be pointed out that 14,700 died in the plague. 250 died in the matter of, the princes who were offering strange fire, just simply not qualified to do so as far as offering incense. And combined, the total was 14,950. And that number breaks down to 5, which we're not surprised to see. 5 is the number of atonement, times 10, completeness, 13, because it points to the final judgment of God at the end of the world, and the number 23. The great tribulation, the judgment which began at the house of God. We can understand it, the complete, the atonement and the complete judgment of God that will come at the end of the world in the tribulation upon those who were never qualified to take or offer incense due to a lack of holiness. They are not saints. And you must be a saint. You must be someone who God sees no sin upon in order to carry this out. Well, now we've looked at these things having to do with incense because I wanted to take the time, this opportunity, given that God is is making reference to it in Luke 1 with Zacharias, and it does tie into his overall gospel program, his salvation program, and his judgment program. Even in, remember going back to Revelation chapter 8, let me turn back there because I didn't read this verse, but we see here how the offering of incense tied into God's judgment, and especially the judgment on Israel, or the spiritually representing the corporate church. In Revelation 8, verse 1, and when he had opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of half an hour. The first part of the Great Tribulation, the 2300 evening mornings. The Great Tribulation is likened to an hour, and here there was silence in heaven because virtually no one anywhere in the world, absolutely none in the church, but virtually no one anywhere in the world was being saved for the first 2300 days of the overall 23-year Great Tribulation period. And it's here that God speaks of the incense in verse 3, and another angel came and stood at the altar having a golden censer. And it was given unto him much incense that he should offer it with the prayers of all saints upon the golden altar, which was before the throne. And the smoke of the incense, which came with the prayers of the saints, ascended up before God out of the angel's hand. And the angel took the censer and filled it with fire of the altar and cast it into the earth. And there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and an earthquake. And the seven angels, which had the seven trumpets, prepared themselves the sound. And the first four, it's judgment on the third part. Judgment on the corporate church. So the prayers of the saints and the incense are right in view when we come to the time of the end, which is after the 13,000th year of Earth's history back in 1988. And why would that be? Because the saints have been praying to God, how long, O Lord, holy and true, before thou judgest them that have shed the blood of thy saints upon the earth?
You've been listening to E-Bible Fellowship's Evening Bible Studies with your host and Bible teacher, Chris McCann. For more studies and information, visit ebiblefellowship.org. Until next time, may the Lord's perfect will be done.